This is the Net Group Investments Insights Podcast, where one or more of our experts explore a variety of views and insights that investors care about.
Hello, we're back with another episode of Sustainable Returns. My name is David Levinson, and I'm excited to bring this conversation to you today. I'm sitting with Voyo Nzube, ESG analyst at Truffle Asset Management. Voyo, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, David. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to our conversation.
So we've heard a lot about ESG and what it means in its entirety and how it has become the root of many debates. We came across a recent study by Stanford University which highlights that investors often focus more on the E, the environmental, and the G, or governance. So today we thought we'd focus on the S in this three-letter acronym, standing for social. This most often relates to the criteria used to examine how organizations manage relationships with employees, suppliers, clients, and the communities in which they operate. So Voyo, can you explain why the S in ESG has become critical now more than ever?
Sure, David. We're seeing a rightful rise in social considerations because social risks affect an organization's reputation and financials. So we're talking labor exploitation, migrant worker abuse, or unsafe conditions. These aren't abstract, and they affect productivity, regulation, and brand value. In South Africa, with our high unemployment rate, these issues are especially material.
And how do you at Truffle assess these type of risks?
We look very closely at two areas. We consider the systemic risks, which are inherent in industries like mining, agriculture, and fashion. And we also look at incident-specific risks. Our initial evaluation includes a review of each company's human rights policy and considers any controversies around human rights abuses in the past 3 years.
Very interesting, and I think a great starting point. So you mentioned looking at incident-specific risk. Can you give the listeners an example of this?
Absolutely. An example is in 2024, where parts of Giorgio Armani's supply chain exploited migrant workers in Italy, which flagged significant enforcement gaps. So not even luxury brands are immune. And that incident triggered investigations, fines, and extensive reputational damage. On the positive side, though, it prompted us as an asset manager to more deeply review and engage with companies in the local fashion and luxury sector to assess their exposure and their supply chain management around human rights abuses. In our discussions with company management, we questioned the process taken should human rights policy violations occur and gained comfort that overall our local clothing companies are undertaking consistent monitoring.
Yeah, the Armani case is certainly troubling to know. There was also a report last year by the Business and Human Rights Resource Center linking around 28 brands to labor rights violations due to what they refer to as aggressive purchasing practices. You raised an important point around not just the principle behind human rights, but the irreparable damage that this can cause, especially when we consider the trend toward conscious consumerism. I'm curious to know, Voyo, when assessing risks, what do your findings often reveal?
So skipping through the finer detail, ultimately we discovered that while most companies in our portfolio at the end of last year, around 96% of them, have human rights policies, about 10% carried medium risk and 27% were considered high risk. Policies are a starting point, but implementation and enforcement are what truly make the difference. Knowing this, we maintain continuous engagement with company management. We question them, ask about monitoring practices, and check whether corrective action follows incidents. For example, in mining, we expect companies to partner with communities, not just tick boxes.
Which shows us that it's not just about having these policies, but about how they are applied?
Exactly. Investors should always assess the quality of human rights policies and how companies respond to incidents. This helps protect both people and portfolios.
So over and above that, what is the thing investors and our listeners, for that matter, need to always keep top of mind?
It's really quite simple, David. Social risks are financial risks. Addressing them upfront isn't charity. It's part of safeguarding long-term organizational value. Then there's also the principle that no one should be violating another human being.
I like that, Voyo. Even on a matter of principle, human rights violations certainly have no place in the sustainable world we're working towards. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, David. Looking forward to the next one.
Me too, Voyo. And to our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode. For me, it certainly added meaning and brought to life the S component of ESG. We'll be back soon with more on Sustainable Returns, where we unpack more insights and key movements and trends in the responsible investment space.
This podcast is for marketing purposes only. The information contained in the podcast or video was for information purposes and does not constitute advice, recommendation, or an offer or solicitation to purchase or sell any funds or strategies to any person in any jurisdiction in which the offer, recommendation, or solicitation to purchase would be unlawful.